Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dare to Care in the Workplace. My guest today is Dr. Marie-Hélène Pelletier. Did I do that right?
You did wonderful, Kathleen. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Welcome, welcome. She's the author of The Resilience Plan, and she has a lot to share with us today. Welcome to the podcast, and tell us about your journey, the journey that got you here. Like, how did you get here as a keynote speaker, an author, and really a sought-after thought expert?
The short answer, Kathleen, is I followed my nose. I followed what I was interested in. For me, it happened to be psychology, which led to becoming a registered psychologist. Then my doctoral research led to me requiring a lot of funding. I was doing telehealth, imagine that, 20 years ago. So doing therapy via video conferencing at a time where technology was not even fast enough to transmit video data. But I did that, which then led to realizing I had an interest in leadership, in management, because I had to manage a lot of people and money to do this. And so basically, it's bringing psychology and business together in creating, and that's what led to this particular book, The Resilience Plan, which is really about being strategic about our own resilience.
Yes, and resilience, we don't give ourselves as humans enough credit for how resilient we really are. I feel like I see people overcoming so many things and they don't even realize they're overcoming it. They're just moving through their lives. They don't, I read about and watched your video on your mountaineering accident. Can you share that experience with us?
Well, yes, as you say, each of us have different ways in which we are resilient, learn about how to become even stronger, even more resilient over time. The story, Kathleen, you're referring to is that I was doing a trek, an 8-day trek with my husband. And in that trek, we had to cross a river at some point, initially on day one, which was fairly demanding, but fine. And we had to go in the river to cross it, about 12 steps and all. But later in that same trek, for all kinds of reasons, we actually had to cross that same river again. Only that river was now very different because more snow had melted. So the river was, in fact, much more tumultuous. And in trying to cross it, I almost drowned. But the lesson from this particular event, looking at how him and I had worked on our plan A, plan B, lots of communication, conversation, planning the first round. And on the second round, because we're exhausted by then and everything else, we let go of all these practices that otherwise would have protected us. And that was the main difference. Yes, the river was bigger, but it's even more how we approached it the second time, which then led to that, looking at how that served as a perfect analogy for us as professionals and leaders on how when things are normal-ish, we do a number of things that actually will protect our resilience. We don't even realize it. But when we get more at risk is when we're facing many, many demands, increasing ones, larger, unexpected ones. And then we just put our head down and say, okay, I'm going to try to meet all these demands. And then we let go of all the things that would have protected us, and that puts us at risk.
And do you ever work with assessments in your work with any kind of with companies? Because I think what you're touching on in a roundabout way here is that, we are who we are, and we're going to address an issue under stress differently than when we're not under stress. Like the mountaineering, experience that you had with your husband. When you were first starting out, you were fresher, more in charge, all your stuff. But you were tired when you came around, which your body was under more stress. So in the work that you do with companies and the work that I do with companies, it's all around their people. And our people tend to behave differently when they're calm, cool, collected, and they have their tool belt on, and they're ready for anything. But when we're under stress, we tend to revert back to kind of caveman, cavewoman, survival instincts and who we are. Do you have any tools in your work with companies? And tell us about that.
That's an interesting point, because there are, in some ways, resilience itself is not a personality trait, right? So sometimes we think it is. Oh, I've been so resilient and this is who I am. I will continue to be this way. It isn't. Resilience is our ability to go through the demands, adversity, and come out even stronger. And it is influenced by some personality traits, like optimism, for example. But in itself, it's not a personality trait. But that's a trap, thinking that it is. And another trap is sometimes people think that they don't need to do anything about it, or that they can't, that it will either be there for us or, for them or not when they get there. And so in my work, what I'm saying is we actually know from research many things that would increase our resilience. And seriously, if we took 100 people off the street, they could probably list them for us. We know what the things are. Research very consistently point to at the top 4, and they're not in this order. We don't have research that says this one comes first, so I'll just say them in whatever order. But exercise, we want 3 types: cardio, strength training, and meditative type activity. We want nutrition, huge impact on our psychological health, sleep, 7 to 8 hours, and then time with people we enjoy spending time with. And then there are others, right? Time in nature, volunteer work, artistic activities, could be many things. The problem is not knowing what we should do. It's the implementation in a life that is already very full or overflowing. And so what I started seeing in my work with executives, with high-level professionals and organizations was how, okay, we have this knowledge, we just can't land it in our lives. Yet we all know we need it. We trust the research. And then I realized, wait a second, we actually need to do for our own resilience the same thing we do in business. In business, when we have a great idea and want to move forward with, say, a new product or a new service, we don't just have the good idea and proceed. We have the good idea, and then we look at who else is doing this? How much are they charging for it? Who is buying it? What forces could impact it? We are strategic. So same thing here. If we're going to increase our resilience, and yes, in the workplace, it is really a system. There is the individuals, the teams, the organizations. The focus of this particular book is a bit more on the individual, although I do talk about team in there as well. But what I'm saying is we actually need to be strategic about our own resilience.
That is fascinating. So is resilience, since it's not a behavior, I think you said that earlier, it is a learned trait?
A state.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Sometimes I know we could get in semantics and all, but sometimes trait really refers like a personality trait. It's innate, it's in you, you have it, and that's that. State varies. It's something we can influence. At times will be up here, sometimes it may be lower. It varies over time. So what we're saying, and what research is also telling us, but what we're saying is, okay, so it's not a personality trait, very important, because if we think it is, then we're going to do nothing. So no, it's not. It's something I can, and in fact, really want to invest in. Some people are even seeing it as their competitive advantage, making sure they bring it as high, their baseline as high as they can, so that when the demands come in, they'll be able to continue to bring their best self, professionally and personally, because, that there's also that part. We focus a lot on work, but the reality is we also have other parts of our lives that can benefit from receiving our best.
So the listeners can really anchor into the resilience plan. You gave us 4 factors. Can you dig into the definition for the individual and for the corporation of resilience?
So there are many, and the one that many are using, including me, is that ability to go through adversity and demands and come out even stronger. So I say adversity and demands meaning, because if we just say adversity, we're thinking negative events. We're thinking acute negative, acute chronic, and which is good, important, acute and chronic. But it's also all the demands we're facing. Sometimes they will be positive. Like getting a promotion that we've been working for and wanting. The reality is that too will be demanding on our on our resilience. And there is this element of growth that we're getting, we're growing from it. So same definition for all of us, whether we're looking at it as individuals. So it's my personal ability to go through these demands, come out even stronger. That would be true for the team I'm leading, our ability as a team to go through the mandates that we're receiving and deliver and come out even stronger, and our ability as an organization to do this. Now, it means slightly different things from these different parts of the overall work system, I'll call it. But ultimately, it's always that direction, our ability to navigate these demands, come out even stronger, and be ready for more.
It's kind of like a river. I know you had the accident in the river, but the river flowing through it, it makes a path, and sometimes it goes over debris, and it, so we have to adapt to the environment. Very interesting. So mental health, all of our mental health has come out into the light, into center stage. And I'm glad it has for a number of different reasons. In the workplace, I think there's reports of, dramatic, like 50% of the people who are working today in the United States, that's a report from Korn Ferry, are experiencing some level of mental health issues or challenges, or however you want to put that. I myself in my own company have helped 2 women who had young children, went through 2020, very difficult time with younger children, very difficult time for all of us, but that, compounded it a little bit and made it a little bit more challenging, I'd say. Then each of them lost 2 very significant people in their lives. And so, their mental health and their overall health was severely affected. And we had to, as a company, make changes to help them feel more successful. And I have seen a rise of this mental health in the workplace, and I'm sure you have too. Can you help us as business leaders? Most people listening are business leaders. How can you identify someone going through a mental health issue, moment, tragedy, and what can we do for them? How do we talk to them about it? How is the company going to help with that resilience? How are we going to approach the employee, and what plan can we put together, the employer and the employer, to overcome these issues? Now, that's a loaded question. So I know it is. I'm sorry. But I think it's really will be really helpful to the people listening, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of companies go through this. That's probably why you're so sought after.
Absolutely. It is something that we're all needing to pay attention to. And I would say each team, each organization is on their own journey in terms of, for how long have we been thinking about this? What have we put in place so far? What else can we put in place next? The important piece is to just continue that conversation. And so to the first part of your question, and then I'll go into detail of, yes, what can we say? How can we support? As organizations, the same way we have strategies for the business we're running, for where we're going, we want to have a mental health strategy. And often organizations have had, on the health side, they've had a physical health strategy, right? Helping people maybe be more active, things like this. More and more organizations will have now a combined physical and mental health strategy. What this means is, at the organizational level, they've identified their next goal and ways to reach them. What types of resources do we want to bring to our teams, to our individuals? So that in itself involves attention, and that is a good way to get to results. The same way that in business, we would want to have a strategy to reach our goals. So that's there. But if we go back to the specific here, let's say we're in a team, leader of a team or a colleague, and we're seeing someone around us that just seems to not be their usual self, right? And the signs that they may show, and I would say before I even go through the signs, is that we won't know for sure that these signs are for sure a sign that they are struggling from a mental health perspective. It may or may not be. But and we don't need to know necessarily in the workplace. Sometimes people are willing or not willing to share however they're feeling. But if we see someone, for example, having challenges with their concentration, being more irritable, a change in how they tend to make decisions. So if they usually were, fairly quick, yep, let's do this, do that, and now they're, I don't know. Or if usually they love to take their time, that's what works for them, and now they're, yep, go. It's not like one or is better than the other. It's a change from how they used to be. So that's how often we'll say overall, just not their usual self. So as you're noticing things like this, yes, you do want to say something. And usually I say two main things. You want to state your observations and offer to talk. So, and each person can find their own words. But say, for example, you and I, we've connected a few times over Zoom, and usually you turn on your camera, you're, listening, smiling, talking, all these things. And then for the past few times, you just keep the camera off. You don't interact much. So I could say something like, hey, Kathleen, usually when we talk on Zoom and all, you're turning your camera on, you're talking and you're contributing quite a bit. And I love that and all. But in the past few times, you haven't been doing this. Are you okay? Would you like us to talk? And if you say, no, I'm fine, then you can say, well, if it changes, let me know. And if Kathleen says, yes, I sure, let's have a chat, then we find a moment for us to chat. And my main job is just to listen and help Kathleen remember the resources we have access to, whether in our organization we have extended health benefits, whether we have access to an employee and family assistance program, whether she could talk to her physician or nurse practitioner. But keep in mind that even if, say, in this case, Kathleen decides not to talk to me and all, what I've done here is I've contributed to a culture where we check in with each other, and I've made it okay. I've reminded her that it's okay to do this. She may not decide to talk to me, but she may decide to talk to Joe because she interacts with Joe even more often, and that's a good idea. It's fine. I will never know. But my decision to just reach out and check in can lead to very positive outcomes.
It's that, compassionate encouragement. You share what is happening. And, I was on another podcast guest last week, and she called them boundaries, kind of emotional boundaries, workplace boundaries, personal boundaries. Everybody has boundaries, and we have to respect those boundaries. We also have to, I call it the airport message. When you're in an airport, you always hear constantly, if you see something, say something. And it's more compassionate to ask the question about, how are you? I noticed something has changed. May I be helpful to you? And then what do employers do when their employees share? How can they help that employee through their mental health journey and what they need next? So we've talked about, if you see something, say something and be compassionate about it. Then what?
Now turning it to this point, because there could be a moment where what we know from research, that if someone in practice, if we have trust in our leader, we're more likely to actually share how we're doing and what we need. And so most leaders think that they are trusted, and that people would go to them, but not necessarily always the case. And ways to increase this trust, and we've heard this message before, it's easier said than done, but it does have to do at times with sharing your own vulnerability. Now, by sharing own vulnerability, it doesn't mean that you need to share something massive or really big. It can be, but it does not have to be. It could be as simple as sharing that you made sure you went for your run on the weekend to replenish from a mental health perspective. All you've done there is pointed to the fact that it is on your radar. You acknowledge that we all have a need to pay attention to our mental health, and that's it, right? So there is this aspect. Assuming that there is trust, that there has been this conversation, we want our managers and leaders really to know what resources they have access to, because it's not because this was shared with them once before, or or we assume that they should know because they're in a management role. We want to make sure that they're aware, comfortable, they are aware of updates. Maybe even at times they've tried these resources, so they can invite team members to contact them in a way that is speaking from experience. So these are all ways in which it will make this conversation even more supportive, easier to have, and then more helpful.
Yeah, and what is your opinion of all the pipping going on? I call it the pip. Everybody's so ready to put an employee who might be having a mental health issue and might lead to a performance issue on a performance improvement plan, therefore called the PIP. I call it pipping someone. I mean, we could reduce the pipping if we had these kinds of conversations. But really what you're talking about, training your managers, your leaders. And is that the work that you do with organizations? Do you train the leaders and the managers? And tell us more about that.
That's part of what I do, yes. And it will depend on each organization, where they're at as it relates to their mental health strategy, really. Because you'll have organizations where it really depends on where people are at on the journey. One of the things we know overall is that the more people have that competency, that confidence about this area, the words, the ways in which they want to interact, the ways in which they want to come across authentically as leaders, the better. So that will vary. But one of the things that will allow them to do that is they first need to make sure they've done it for themselves. And so often, managers and leaders are so turned towards their teams. Very good. We want that. However, a lot of the time, that's where all of their focus is. And that's in part what then makes them realize later in the process, like at that day 8 at the river, that they have not had a plan for themselves. I was just talking to someone in my executive coaching literally earlier today, who for a while, they knew that they had this large project deliverable with a deadline coming up soon. And as it happens sometimes, right, a senior level organization for all kinds of reasons added two significant components to it, which means they don't even have now a firm deadline now. It will be the next few months. And now this leader is not sure they can keep going, because their battery, they were ready to land this and finish and then take a break, which probably was not as optimal. But at this point, they actually need to make significant changes in order to be able to keep going. And what makes a difference for some of the leaders I work with upstream, if I can call it that, is having created, even better, if at a time that is prior to any of these demands happening, that strategic plan that allows them to create for themselves the conditions that will make them bring their best to all of these demands, including managing their own resilience and mental health, almost treating it as a competitive advantage, allowing them to really bring their best so that they can deal with these changes. And, changes will be coming also as they relate to artificial intelligence in our workplaces. We've had the chronic demands coming from the pandemic. We're going to get the chronic demands coming from our, AI. And therefore, having a plan in advance, we need this, because managers and leaders are taxed. They are right now.
Well, they're very taxed. And what I find is that there's so many open positions that it's creating tension. And leaders are just tired. And I want to dig deeper into burnout, but we have to stop here. Tune in for the next episode of Dare to Care in the Workplace, where Dr. Marie-Hélène Pelletier, author of The Resilience Plan, will explore how tackling seemingly minor challenges can pave the way to overcoming major obstacles.
Anytime we implement active coping, we'll say, it increases our sense of self-efficacy, our belief that we can influence this. Okay, now we're starting to change this. It also changes our belief that we may be able to influence this in the future.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.